What is up, you guys? Jake State Farm here with Atomic Theory, and we are back with another Atomic video. And thank you guys for tuning into this video. I've got a super special video for you guys. Real quick before I get into it, sorry for the inconsistency over the last couple weeks. I've been with family through Christmas and New Year's and all that stuff. And then this following week, I'll be going to Guatemala with my church. We're going to be building some houses down there, and it's going to be a good time. And so I won't be as consistent uploading these next few weeks, but I do have some exciting announcements to come. And once I'm back from my trip, it'll be about a week or so, and then I will be back trying to upload as much as possible. Super busy with a lot of other stuff going on, but yeah, I'm super committed to the channel. I'm having a lot of fun with it and super excited for today's video. We are going over one of the most, if not the most common opening in atomic chess on Lichess. It is knight f3, f6, and then this move e3. And we're going to be going over how to play against that as black. I guess I may as well flip the board. Now, real quick before we get into this, I want to share a story, and it's going to kind of dictate how I go through this opening today. I won't go through it how I normally go through openings. But basically, I went to a chess camp when I was maybe 12 or 13 years old, and obviously it was for standard chess, not for atomic chess. And the guy who was teaching it on the last day of the camp, he showed us basically almost every single opening as white and black. So he went through white, and he would go through e4 and all the different replies that black has against e4, d4 and all the replies there, c4, knight f3, a little bit of that. He gave us the names, the openings, the ideas. Like, he'd play a few moves, right? Like if it was Sicilian, he'd say, white generally goes for knight f3 and d4, and just kind of, here's how white's accomplishing the opening principles. Here's kind of some of the main ideas. And all that to say, at the time, I was maybe a, 1600 rated player or so. And funnily enough, that day helped me so much because I was finally in my brain able to put names to a lot of these openings that I'd been playing. And it also helped me branch out a little bit. At the time, I only played one opening as white, and I had like one reply against e4 and one reply against d4. Well, after that day, I got super interested in learning all these different openings that he was telling me, because when he explained the ideas and such, it was really interesting to me. And so after that day, I got really interested in learning all these new openings. And so, for instance, against e4, in over the board games, I've now played e5, e6, g6, d5, c6, c5, knight f6, b6. All these moves, actually g5 one time as well. All these moves are moves that I've played in over the board rated tournaments, and I feel comfortable playing now. Oh, d6 is another one as well, which kind of transposes into some of that g6 stuff as well. And so all that to say, my plan for today's video is not to give you one line that just beats this opening, right? Because white has the upper hand. White, with best play, white will at least have an equal or slightly better position in this opening. A lot of times white is winning if they know the prep. And so my plan for today's video is not to say, I may give a recommended line here or there, but really my goal is to give a basis to say, here are all the different options for black. And I want you to go and explore what works best for you. And I'll show you what's worked best for me, but I don't want to, at the end of the day, I don't want to make that decision for you, okay? There's a lot of different tries for black here, and at the end of the day, you just have to make the decision that works best for you. And so I do also want to mention before we jump into this is a common move order. There's also e3 and then knight f3, which gets into some different lines. That's actually how I started atomic chess, right? So if you're new to atomic chess and you've just learned one opening, it's likely knight f3 and e3. It's what a lot of people play at every level of atomic. It's strong, and it's also simple. There's really only two moves that white is ever going to play here. With knight h6 and knight c6, it's just instantly lost for black. Okay, the only other real try here for black is the move pawn to d6, which rarely gets played. If you're playing from the white side, just a side note, e3 and then knight f3 is actually an interesting move order to basically not allow this move pawn to d5. just the way that the move order ends up working out. But anyway, I suggest you looking into that. It's an interesting kind of ripple in it that leads into some fun lines, and it's kind of how I got my start in atomic chess before I started exploring different openings. So without further ado, let's get into this. And like I said, I'm just going to try to give you a baseline for all the different ideas that Black has here, and I won't necessarily go in any type of order, but we're just going to kind of go based off of what I'm feeling. So yeah, let's hop right into it here. So knight f3, f6, e3. I'm going to start with d5 because I don't know this line as well, and I don't have too much advice for you here. I can just kind of show you the main lines here, and I guess I'll open up my database so you can see. I will say, let me go back here. So people often say that this line is broken. It's annoying to play against. It's the worst line. I don't think so. I mean, you can see here, not only is my win rate higher than other openings, but my performance rating is higher too. I have a 22-28 performance rating. That's higher than all these other moves here. And so it's not just that low rated players are playing this. Of course they are, but I'm winning so many more games in this line than I do in a bunch of these other lines. And actually in this d4 line, as a side note, I've just recently started doing a little bit better in it. Before, I didn't know the prep and I was really bad in it, so I actually spent a couple days just like really prepping this line, and so that's the only reason that I've been pretty successful against d4 there. But yeah, like knight c3 is really annoying to me, knight d4 is really annoying to me. White has a lot of options here. E3, depending on the player, I'm a lot of times happy to see e3 because there's so many options for Black here. So let's go over d5. The main move here is knight g5 for White. And you basically have two options. Okay, so the most common option is just to take this knight, and after queen h5, g6, queen e5, something like bishop e6, and then you'll often see something like bishop b5, c6, and basically what White will go for is a position similar to something like this, where White's up a pawn and they have a pleasant position. Okay, Black's idea here is to get as much play on the king side as possible. So something like knight f6, and then bishop g7 with this threat on the b2 pawn, and then maybe a kingside castle. And really, Black's main goal in this is to try to get an infiltrated knight. If you can get your knight into your opponent's position, you're actually doing quite well. So like after knight c3, I would probably just continue with knight f6. And yeah, already White obviously can't take here because that's just going to be mate. And so instead, like if you play something like f3, yeah, then you can see like White's kind of already lost its advantage after bishop h3 and g takes. I don't actually know the move. I guess e5 here just to get some space. And you can see how White doesn't necessarily want to castle kingside here because you may get some attack going on the king side. So those are some ideas for Black. Of course, White doesn't have to go into this though. There's other moves here. There's just immediately taking instead of going bishop b5. I like the move pawn to b3. There's also knight c3. So plenty of options for White there. The idea that I've been going for recently is to go for bishop g4, and obviously you can see I haven't played it much, but recently I've tried it a few times here. You can see some games from December that I've been playing this, all against BG here. And after pawn to f3, you're just blocking this queen. So then we'll take the knight, and there's really hardly any tricks for White here, and that's why I think I like this. You're down a pawn, but White doesn't necessarily have any easy tactical tricks here. Okay, I'll give you one off the top of my head here that's pretty nice. Say after knight a3 and b5, there's this move pawn to d4, and you have to be careful not to play knight to f6, which you can see I've done this. The move bishop d3 is actually really scary. And you have to find, you can see the computer says you have to find this move pawn to g6, which is sacking yet another pawn. If you do the tempting move of knight e4, White has this nasty trick of f takes e4, and no matter what you do here between queen h5 and castles, White's just going to get too big of an attack here. Your bishop is so slow getting out here. And yeah, this is basically GG here. So that's one little trap you have to be wary of. But yeah, just going e6 instead pretty much stops all that. You know, after bishop d3, well, I guess it just doesn't work because then you'd have queen h4. But yeah, so anyway, that's one thing to be scared of. But other than that, you're basically just playing a game down a pawn. Your development's not that bad. Again, kind of same thing. If you can get this knight in, that would be nice. But yeah, a lot of times I'll go for the same thing: knight f6, g6, bishop g7, and maybe queenside castles. But this would be a really nice position, and I want to do it. I want to study this position a lot because there's so many different options here, right? As white, you can see a bunch of different moves that white plays. So let's say the most common move, d4. Now black's got a bunch of options. You can see just so many different moves. And I should know, as the black player, this works to your advantage, right? As black, you want to get out of white's prep as soon as possible. And so a position like this is really quite nice for the black pieces because there's so many options for both white and black that no matter what white plays, you can play something that's probably out of their prep. I've even seen in some lines after knight a3 and you've established this pawn on b5, if you then go d4, there's this tricky idea of knight d7, and then like knight f6 and knight h6 trying to get some pressure here. So there's just so many ideas for black here, and I really have kind of wanted to for a while now just study this position a little bit more. I think there's some tricks here for black, and this is a line that I would recommend if you're playing against a player that you think you can beat pretty easily and you think it's okay to be a pawn down. It's a pretty it's a good position to basically get out of an opponent's prep if you're worried about their prep. So this is a line that I want to get to know a little bit better. But as you can see from my database, that is not my strong suit. Okay, my strong suit is this idea of pawn to e6. Okay, and really you'll see almost every time your opponent's going to play knight d4. Recently, as you can see from the white side, I've been playing this move pawn to b4 with quite a bit of success. I think I've got a pretty high performance rating with it. So that's a move that I've been trying. Of course, bishop d3 is an idea, but then there's just bishop b4 and bishop takes c3. So really the main move that you're going to see almost every time, and really the only move you should be worried about, is the move knight d4 here. And here there's a bunch of different lines. As you can see, I score really well here. And I will admit, against stronger players, I don't do as well in these lines. Okay, people that have prepped, these lines aren't as effective, although I will give you a line at the end of the video. Stay tuned for my number one recommendation against this idea of knight d4. It's a line that I've been playing a lot. It's a line that the world champion just played to get a win against BG in their match in the HMBC finals. And it's a line that I discovered maybe about a year ago or so, and it's a ton of fun. Again, it follows that same idea of how do we get our opponents out of prep as soon as possible. Okay, as white, you're happy to stay in prep. You're happy to say, I've prepped this whole game. I've won games as white with full prep, with 20 moves of prep. As black, your goal is to get your opponents out of prep as soon as possible. What's the best way to do that? Play a line where there's a ton of different options for you. Okay, so there's really no way that white could even study it because there's so many different ideas that you have in the position. And also on a side note, just like how can I complicate the position, right? How can I make it pretty sharp? How can I set some traps for white? If you just play a standard game, as you can see the move c6 does, yes, it's the most common move, and yes, people have okay success with it, but in general, white's going to be able to win those positions more often than not. So going over my database here, let's start with the move c6. It is the most common move in the position. It's not my favorite move to play, but it's not a bad try. So the main move here is knight to b5, and the idea is after c takes, the opponent has queen h5 and this idea of queen b6, and after which if we take on b6, then there will be bishop b5, king f7, and bishop takes d7. Then this move rook takes a2 is pretty much forced, and as you can see here, I score terribly in this line. This line is tough to play as the black pieces. You score a little better in general, but yeah, still 19% win percentage is pretty rough. The big plan for black here is really to go for a draw, so you can take advantage of the fact that white has this bishop, and there are some positions where maybe you can trade this bishop and knight off for these two pawns, and then you can get into a drawn endgame where this bishop is ineffective because there's no pawns for it to block, right? As long as there's pawns blocking pawns like this, and you leave all your pawns on light squares, then you'll get a draw. There's also some ideas in this where you're trying to get your knight in. As white, it's generally pretty easy to stop. Okay, let's say you play the move pawn to b4 just to block this bishop. Then there's something like knight h6. And after the move g4, then you can maybe play something like f5, attacking this and trying to get your knight in. Of course, the computer will say it's fine for white with best play, but there are some positions where the knight ends up getting in, and it may be a little scary for white. This is kind of one of the first lines that you would learn as an atomic player, and it's not a terrible line, but it's certainly not my recommendation. So say we go into this line, this knight c6 and queen b6. Well, instead of taking, what if we just start with king f7? Okay, so this is another option. As you can see, it's the option I use more, and I score slightly better with it as well. So starting with king f7, the main move for white here is queen c7, after which black has two moves, knight h6 and bishop to b4. And knight h6, I guess white is pretty easily able to stop this with just queen takes d7, and after knight g4, f4, knight takes h2. Yes, black has this pawn that can roll down the board, but I would just play something like bishop b5, and your king's always going to be able to get over in time. You just need to push this pawn one space forward, and with this dark square bishop, there's no way to get the rook in here. So that's not a great try as the black pieces, in my opinion. In fact, I guess we can look and see as white, queen c7, knight h6. So I'll say that. It looks like I don't score too well against it. Maybe this was games. Yeah, I guess I haven't played too many games in this recently. Maybe I've studied it since then. But in general, I'm not scared to see it. Yeah, you can see knight h6 here, and the computer likes queen takes d7 just fine. So with best play, it's definitely a win for white there. But okay, the scarier move for the white pieces is to play the move bishop b4, followed by c3 and queen to f8. And now I will note here, this is an interesting thing in this line. If you ever need to draw as white, you can get it here with the move queen to f4 or queen to g3. And after king e8, which is the only move, then you can go back to c7, and there's just a free draw for the white pieces here if they want it. If not, there's some ideas of c3 and bishop c4, and generally as black you will go for sometimes knight h6, but a lot of times you go knight g to e7, and maybe try to get your king out to g8 if you can. Yeah, I guess after c takes, it's something like queen b4 and then knight g to e7, and then maybe getting your rook out and trying to manually castle with king g8. But yeah, this position is good for white, but there's a lot to look at here for black. I think it's a fine try for black, and there's some people that play this line as black that I think do pretty okay with it. I mean, it's even material. Yes, you have a queen here that's scary, but there's no immediate win for white. White's got to make a few more good moves before they can find a win. So not a bad try for black. I'll rate it a 5 out of 10 for doing that. But okay. So we're looking at c6, knight b5, a couple other tries here. One is to go bishop b4, c3, and knight h6. And essentially what you're doing is you're allowing knight c7, forcing out king f8. And pretty important here not to go knight e8, which just allows g6. And now this queen is opened up a little bit. But what you want to do as a white here, what the white, a smart player with the white pieces here will do, is just keep their knight on c7, which is blocking this queen, and also kind of restricting just some development here, like say d5 and e5. There's always going to be threats of knight e6 there if this light squared bishop comes off the board. So this knight on c7 ends up being pretty annoying for the black pieces. And as white, what you really need to do is, cut off this knight first and foremost, and then just expand in the center here. And as black, you're trying to do the same thing. If you can go d5, d4, that can be pretty good. Another idea is a5 and knight a6 to try to get some play on the queen side, maybe rook b8 and b5 as well. The reason why I don't play this line much, but the reason why I think this is a good try for black is because, again, there's just so many options here. So obviously on this move right here, you want to cut off the knight, so either g4 or h3 is recommended. But look at all these ideas for black. You've got bishop d6, knight a6, d5, even knight f5, which is a move I would never play here, but it looks like that gets played sometimes. So just so many ideas for black here. Yeah, a5 is a lesser known move, but I honestly think it's a fine move here. And so just so many options for black that as white, this is actually where my prep ends on move 7 after the move pawn to h3. This is genuinely where my prep ends because there's just so many options for black. It's not really worth my time or my effort to prep this line. Yes, if you look at the computer, it'll say it's great for white, but black does have some counterplay here, and the computer can't always be too reliable in atomic because it assumes best play from both sides. And with best play, this knight on c7 is going to be a difference maker. But white doesn't always play this perfectly, and I do think this is a fine try for black. And we're going to see a lot of positions similar to this, where you basically just, instead of taking the knight, you just allow this knight c7 idea. I guess I should mention queen a5 as well. This line is not effective. I would not recommend it. After the move pawn to b4 and queen a4, you would just go queen h5, g6, and I want to say it's something like, oh yeah, it's queen takes h7 first, and there's threats of knight c3. You can see white wins this every time. This gets played a lot at the lower level because you're thinking, I want to get my queen out before knight c7 is played. But in practice, this just is not a good line. There's threats of this, knight c3. There's just so many ideas here for the white side. And white being able to trade off his queen for these pieces is actually really good in this line. So, like I said, there's a lot of similar lines here where you just allow the knight to come to c7. So one is bishop to, not e7, bishop to d6, putting pressure on this h2 pawn. And so then you'll see knight c7, king f8, and and you get into a similar position. There is this tricky move, and this is one that I like as white. There's this tricky move of queen g4, which is attacking this pawn, and after g6, you will play knight takes e6, threatening queen d7, and so then black is, one idea is f5, which will eventually allow a queen trade after queen d4. Of course, you can't push here because of this, and so eventually the queens will have to come out and get traded, essentially. Or another way to do it is to go queen a5, b4, and then something like queen d5 or queen f5, just forcing out a trade of queens. And so this is a line that I like as white because you're going to be up a pawn no matter what. You can guarantee the queens are coming off the board, and it kind of stops a lot of black's fun, I think. But a lot of times you won't see this. You'll probably see f4 or g3, and then it kind of transposes into what we just saw. Then this knight is going to stay on c7, trying to block your queen. Meanwhile, I'm going to get my knights to the side of the board. I might go h5 or a5 as well, just trying to play on the flanks. It's harder for me to push my d pawn here because of this bishop on d6. But the bishop not being on b4 means knight a6 is an immediate threat. So one idea would be to go like a5 and knight a6 and just put a lot of pressure on this b4 square here. So this is a fine line. The black pieces tend to score pretty well with it. As you can see, bishop d6 is by far the best plan in terms of win percentage here. So I think this is a fine line. And lastly, a similar line here is, instead of playing the move pawn to c6, you could start with knight h6 or bishop b4. And after knight to b5, then you go bishop b4, c3, and c6. And this just kind of transposes into what we just saw. So a lot of lines that kind of lead into this type of position where this knight will get to c7 and you will just try to get some counterplay. There's another option to take on a7 as well in these positions, but in general, I think you're pretty happy to see this as black. For instance, right now you would just get a free knight on g4, which is pretty nice. This position is pretty pleasant. But even in some lines where you're not able to get this and they're able to take on a7, you still maintain castling rights. And in general, I think knight c7 is a little bit scarier than knight a7, but both are solid moves. But yeah, when I play these lines, I'm definitely more worried about knight c7. This knight just ends up being pretty annoying for the black pieces. So we've pretty much gone over every idea in this pawn to c6. I showed you the ones that I thought were maybe pretty good and the ones that maybe aren't so effective. And now I want to take a look at some other lines here. As you can see, I've got two moves that I like to play a lot here. So let's start with this move bishop to b4. And after pawn to c3, our idea is never to take here. We don't want to take, allowing queen h5, g6, and queen c5. And then after d6, we're just down a bunch of material here. This is a line that a lot of new players fall into as the black pieces. It looks pretty good. You're taking this pawn, going up material, but it's only temporary. Okay, the idea is actually to go f5 instead. And you'll understand why this bishop b4 move is important in a second here. But what I want to show you is I want to quickly deviate and show you if we go f5 first, one of the lines that you can fall into here. So let's go queen h5, which is the most common move. I guess an important trap to know. What's the trap you're setting here? Well, the idea is that knight b5, like how am I stopping knight b5, right? Like after knight d4, white was threatening to go knight to b5, and we just played pawn to f5. So how are we stopping knight to b5? By pushing our f pawn. Well, we have this pretty move of queen h4, and then after pawn to g3, going queen c4. And now white is forced to take this because we're threatening to take on c2. So after bishop takes c4, then we have knight to c6, and we're temporarily down a queen for 2 pieces, but this is going to end up being really good for black. I mean, look at my win percentage with the most common move of c3 here. 2600 performance rating. This line is just killer for black. As you can see, the computer says it's a little better for black here. I guess it recommends queen h5, g6, and takes, which just allows this knight b4 idea. But yeah, very pleasant position for black here. The idea is after c3, you would play knight e5, and there's just no way to stop all these threats from black here. A lot of times white will actually at this point just go queen h5 and just trade off and get back to relatively equal material. But even this is not great for white, because after knight f6, f3, black's the one kind of threatening to hop in here. Of course, not immediately, but say after bishop g7, castles and castles, now I'm threatening to come in here, and there's no good way to stop both of them. I guess maybe king h1. But yeah, wow, this is the computer really hates this. I guess you would eventually go like b5 and bishop b7 as well to get a tempo. But okay, so super fun line for black, super good trick. I want to also show you, against me, people don't fall for it as much, but if we go to the database here and let's take off some of these high ratings, go to the lower ratings. Let's go even lower than that. Let's look at this. Yeah, so between average ratings 400 and 1400, knight b5 is the most common move. Even if we go to say like this middling range here, knight b5 still gets played 23% of the time. So knight b5 is a very common move here. Even at the top level, sometimes players will do this. Most players will understand the trap. They've seen it before. But all that to say, that's the reason why the opponent will play queen h5, g6, and trade off queens before going knight b5. So now there's no more queen h4, queen c4. So all this to say, why did we play the move bishop b4 way back when, before we played f5? What was my big idea? Well, let's look at it now. Let's play bishop b4 now, and then let's go knight c3. And I'm going to show you a long line here. It goes knight f6, f3, and this is all just prep, but I want to show you why this is important here. a6 takes, and then let's go knight e4. Opponent's got to take here, and now if I try the move bishop to d6, then there is a lot of ideas for white here. But if you were to say go g3 and then f4, trying to break this open, yeah, like knight d5 right now is I'd have to imagine pretty strong for white. Yeah, this position is just completely hopeless for the black side. So let's go back to that original position, and I'm going to show you why have I played bishop b4 so many times here. Let's look at bishop b4, and let's say they try to get their knight out now. Well, this is actually not great for white. If we turn on the computer, this move knight to c6, this is just not great anymore. If you try to go knight b5, now there's knight d4, threatening to take on c2. This is actually very, very scary for white. So white has to play this move pawn to c3 instead, which is a fine move. There's nothing wrong with this move. But now we will go f5, and let's see what happens after queen h5 when we go through this line again. And we did knight b5, and then I showed you knight f6, f3, and then we played a6 to force out knight takes c7, and then we sack our knight here on e4, and then this move bishop d6, and remember I said pawn to g3, and then f4. What do you notice about this position that's different? Not only is there no longer knight to d5 here, but I want you to take a look at this queen side and tell me how any of these pieces are getting out anytime soon. They're just not. There's just no good way to develop the queen side here because you force out this move c3, because you played bishop b4 before pushing the pawn to f5. These pieces are now trapped here, essentially, for a few moves. It'll take a while to get out. So let me show you a big trap in this line here. And this is just a line that you'd have to prep, but it's one of the main ideas in this line. The idea is, let's say white gets, obviously the point is that I'm wanting to castle and get my rook on this open file. So white will make a move like, say, bishop c4 just to prepare the castling here. And after castles, rook f1 is the best move, and it is a move that gets played against me a bunch because I play against stronger players. But if we flip over to the Lichess tab, you can see, oh man, that's so beautiful, 74% win percentage. Yeah, and the most common move is castles here, and that is for every game on Lichess here. Against me, rook f1, there's a lot of traps here. There's Bishoy's line of bishop b7 after a couple moves there. There's a king h8 idea. There's a rook d8 idea. I think there's some ideas there that I encourage you to look into, but that's not the main trap. The main trap is after kingside castles. We'll play the move king to h8, and now white is essentially forced to go bishop takes e6. Otherwise, we are threatening to go f takes g3 with this double attack on h2 and f1. So after bishop takes e6, you would go f takes g3, and after the rooks get traded off, this is technically a draw for white, but it's got to be played really perfectly. Yeah, even after h4, I think it's losing just because you're going to be able to get a pawn past. But essentially, even with perfect play for white, remember what I said about the queen side being so slow? Well, we're going to be able to play rook f8 and rook f1, and there's legitimately nothing that the white player can do to stop us here. In fact, this pawn on c3 ends up being a big deal here, because if the pawn wasn't on c3, if you just took this pawn away, white could play pawn to b3, and after rook to f8, bishop b2 with check, and after king to g8, moving your bishop to f6, which blocks this rook. So this pawn on c3 ends up being very key in this line, and it's a big reason why you would go bishop b4 before playing the move pawn to f5 to force out this move pawn to c3 and to set up this whole trap. So yeah, just a beautiful combination there. It's one that I've used to get some wins, and it's a line that it's been used to get a lot of wins on other players as well. So as we saw, there's some other ways to deviate, but a big way that people will deviate is, okay, well now I can just, instead of going queen h5, I'm now able to play knight to b5 because there's no longer queen h4, queen c4, because you're just going to lose a bunch of pieces after c takes b4 there. So that is the one downside of playing bishop b4 before f5, is that f5 is no longer threatening this queen h4, queen c4 idea. But now after knight b5, we'll go queen h4, g3, and okay, I guess I go knight f6 here. And then you may run into a position like d3, queen h5, f3, and after a6, white pretty much has to take here. And I like to go bishop d6 here, and there's plenty of traps here for the black side. I think after h4, I'm trying to remember what it is. I think it's knight d5, I want to say, and after pawn to e4 maybe. Try to remember what this is actually. Yes, I think it's knight e3 takes and f takes e4, and this position has a very high, it's only been reached 13 times, wow, but a 92% win percentage for black. White has to play pretty much perfectly here to win. So that's one trap that you have, but just looking at this position objectively here after bishop d6, you've got f4 ideas, knight d5 ideas, queen f7 ideas if they play like h4 and g4 maybe. This bishop's threatening to come in. Yeah, f4 just threatens to take here, which opens up the bishop. This f-pawn is pinned at the queen, and so black does have a lot of resources here, maybe even castles and some lines as well. black does have some attacking chances, and honestly, the bishop and the pawn is not a huge price to pay for the amount of attacking that black's going to do here. And bishop d6 is by no means forced. There's f4 first, there's knight d5, there's rook c8. There's a bunch of different ideas for the black side here. And so it's a reason why I really love this line, is because, again, like let's say somebody beats you in at one time. Well, then instead of playing bishop d6, maybe you just start with knight d5 the next game instead, and you go for a different idea, like maybe knight f4 or something like that. So anyway, super fun line that, as you can see for black here, I score pretty well with. This is a really great win percentage to have as the black pieces, so I'm quite happy with that. I think that pretty much covers bishop b4. So now let's look at the final move, which is pawn to f5. And again, I showed you that one line after queen h5 here, after knight b5. Why bishop b4 is not the best move. It's not a bad move either. There's other lines to go into, but I like to start with this move. Well, I guess there's a few ideas here. So one idea is to go for knight f6 and something like bishop g7 maybe. So say knight f6, f3, bishop g7. And now if white were to take on a7, then you'd have this idea of knight e4 potentially. And if white were to take here, then my bishop is now coming and taking on b2, and this is completely winning for black. So white would have to find something like pawn to d4, and then at the very least you get an infiltrated knight. This is, not a bad position to have here. Anytime you can get an infiltrated knight as black, it's probably an okay position. So that's one idea, is like knight f6, bishop g7. There's also, after f3, you could go ahead and sack the knight and then go for bishop g7. This is a line I used to go for a lot. Pawn to d4, and just castling, just sacking this pawn on a7 and just trying to get as much pressure here. As you can see, I score okay with this line here. Yeah, maybe even like b5 and bishop b7 at some point, and these pawns aren't able to really push here. I used to love this line of like pawn f4, and white would always reject with e4, and then I would go bishop h6, kind of threatening this move, pawn to f3, and I used to always think this line was pretty tricky, and I think it is. I think white's got to play pretty well to stop all your ideas here. So that's one line you can go for in this position. Another line is to start with a6 and then go for something like knight f6 and just kind of transpose. Yeah, even knight d5 is an idea as well. Okay, so I should mention that. It's been so long since I've played this. So there's this idea of knight f6, f3, and then knight d5. And basically white's best idea is actually to go knight to c3, but a lot of times players don't know the prep here. It's something weird like knight c3, knight b4, knight a4, I think. Yeah, super weird line that I guess if I look at the Lichess database, I don't think hardly anyone knows this line. Let's see, knight b4, and wow, okay, I guess at the top level, I'm guessing this has a higher average rating. Yeah, so I guess people do have started to learn this line, but as you can see, it's still only played in 1/4 of games. Generally, they'll go knight to d6, and after takes and bishop b5, you're down a pawn, but your position is not terrible. Let's say knight c6 and knight c3, then you'll go bishop g7, which just pins this knight here. And okay, yeah, you're down a pawn, but it's not a terrible position for the black side. So that's one line you can go for as well. Again, this is why I love this move, pawn to f5 on move 3 here. There's just literally an endless amount of options for black, and I think it's why I've scored so well with this line from the black side, is because there just are so many options. How are you going to prep for a player when they have 5 or 10 or 15 different lines to play? It's tough. It makes it tough for white to just prep one line, which honestly I feel like in 2 knights is a lot easier to do. So that's why I like seeing knight f3, e3 a whole bunch. Okay, so now we're at the end of the video, and I think I've given you a little bit of a baseline, and I urge you guys to go explore what you want to explore. But I have to show you my secret sauce. If you're still here, thanks for watching to the end, and I'm going to show you the line that I discovered, I think it was about a year ago, when I was preparing for an opponent in the Atomic World Championship, and I saw that they had played like 10 games in this position as white, and they had lost every single one. And granted, they had played against a robot, but if you are losing a position 10 out of 10 times is the white side against best play, then all I have to do is play perfectly and I'll beat you. No, I'm only joking, but seriously, going 10 for 10 as the black side is just incredible. If there's even an opening that can do that, it's incredible. So it is in this line, pawn to f5, and after the move queen to h5 and g6, we go queen takes g5, and after knight b5, we don't go for knight f6, we don't go for bishop b4, we don't go for bishop g7. We play this move pawn to a6. And after knight takes c7, we then play the very, very strange looking move pawn to h5. And I could spend a whole video on this line, on why this line is effective, what are the ideas behind it. I could spend forever talking about this. I don't fully understand it. There's so much I have to learn in this line. I'm not going to dive into all of that. I'll dive into a little bit of it, give you a baseline for it. But if this is a line that you're interested in, it's one that you have to go, and I would say study, but honestly, it's a line that you're going to have to go and play, because the only way you're going to get better at this line is playing it over and over and over again. There's just so many ideas as black here. The main moves that black is looking to play is pushing this h pawn down the board, pushing this d pawn specifically to d5, and pushing this b pawn to b5, and you're just trying to restrict the white pieces as much as you can, and then you'll start developing. Then you'll play rook c8, then you'll play bishop g7, then you'll commit your knight to h6 or f6, then you'll decide if you want to castle or not. You're kind of leaving your intentions unknown. And the best move for white here, I think, is to play the move pawn to h4. Just cut out any ideas of getting this pawn down the board. A lot of times it doesn't happen. A lot of times you'll see something like knight to c3, and then, okay, I'm going to restrict your knight with pawn to b5. You try to break it open with a4. Now I have bishop g7 or knight f6, just putting pressure on you. So there's so many ideas for black here. Okay, so I'll go over a big one here. So let's say they go pawn to d4, and then let's say that you go h4 and maybe bishop to d3, and now h3 and g3. Okay, now already white has a huge weakness. If you can get a knight to g4 and this bishop can't take this pawn, which is pretty easy to do. I mean, you can already go bishop b4 and bishop takes c3 here. But if you can get this knight to g4, white is pretty much screwed here. I mean, you're going to take on h2, and then you're going to push this pawn down the board. And white doesn't really want to castle here, because if you castle and there's knight to g4, then you're just absolutely lost. There's just no way to stop that. Another idea is to play like maybe something like g5 and get a pawn storm with the g pawn all the way to g3. There's so many ideas here. I've even played like a5, a4 in some games, and then rook a5 and a rook lift over here. I like this idea like h4, rook h5, rook g4 as well after they've castled, because there's no g3 or g4, because you've just got h takes g3 there. So there's just an endless amount of possibilities in this line. Even d5, d4 is sometimes an idea to put pressure here. There's just so many different ways to put pressure on the white pieces. And if you want to see a fabulous game, Never of Zero played a game against BG in the HMVC Grand Finals, and Never of Zero was able to take the victory as the black side in just a phenomenal game. I don't know what the stats are on this. I know it's a lesser known line. Yeah, as you can see, it's way down here. It's really a secret line that not a lot of players know about, but I'm sharing it with you today. It's a line that, as you can see, I've been playing quite a bit recently. If you click on it here, I've got, a whole bunch of games from December in this line. It's a line that I've recently been really into. I've been trying to study it a little bit, and I highly, highly, highly recommend this line. It checks all the boxes for a black opening in Atomic. It complicates the position for the opponent. It makes them spend time because they probably haven't seen it. It's an uncommon move. And lastly, it's a move with so many different ideas that it's almost impossible to prep as white. Yes, you can prep against it. You can prep against any line. But for instance, if you prep this move pawn to d4 and you're expecting me to play d5, there are so many different moves that I can play as black. It's just so hard to prep as white because there's so many different options that black has at their disposal. And of course, at the end of the day, you're down a bishop and a pawn. Yes, it is technically losing, but in a 3-minute or 1-minute Atomic game, when your opponent doesn't have infinite time to think through all the options. This is a very reliable and a very practical choice for the black side, and I really think might be the new opening that starts just that people just start really enjoying playing against this spam of knight f3, e3. I think this line in particular after h5 just has so much potential to be the next big opening, and I hope you guys will join me along for it. I hope you guys will start playing it. I think it is super effective, and I think that it is a great way to get a whole bunch of wins as the black side in atomic chess. But that is going to do it for today's video. Let me know what your favorite part was. Let me know if you have any questions. Let me know what you play against knight f3, e3, and please let me know what openings you want to see in the future, what openings really give you a lot of pain, whether it's a white opening or a black opening. I'm happy to help. This video was made in reference to a comment. Somebody asked me to make a video against knight f3, e3, so I fully intend to make videos on openings that you guys want to see. So with that being said, please let me know down in the comments what you want to see next. But that is going to do it for today's video. I really appreciate you guys' support, appreciate you guys watching, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.